Hello, this is Matthew Schutte. I'm here with Gene Russell and David Atkinson from Holo Chain and Holo. And it looks like we're live. This is a more distributed Facebook Live event. We are spread all over the globe. Gene, are you in Sausalito, California?
I am
Just
on our
north of
boat
San
in
Francisco.
Sausalito.
David, where are you at the moment?
I'm in London at the moment.
And I am in Davos, Switzerland, at where the World Economic Forum is. So yeah, it's going to be an interesting one. Unfortunately, I might have to run out pretty soon. So Gene and David are going to really be able to answer questions much better than I can, especially related to our upcoming initial community offering and the organizational structure or structures that we've been setting up with Holo. We'll do a couple of quick announcements while we wait for people to jump onto the Facebook Live, and then we'll dive into questions. So if you have questions, please start asking them in the chat, and we're looking forward to answering them. Please join our chat community if you haven't already done so. We are at chat.holochain.org. There's, I think, about 800 people at the moment having amazing conversations in there. Again, chat.holochain.org. Also, if you are interested in learning more about this stuff in person, we have a handful of meetups starting up around the world. We've had a few in San Francisco, in Atlanta. I think there's one getting organized in Brazil. We have a hackathon happening in London. Our next meetup in San Francisco is going to be sometime next week, that we haven't confirmed it yet. If you just Google Bay Area Holo Chain meetup, you'll be able to find the details within the next couple of days. But we're looking at either at Mozilla in San Francisco or at the location that we've been at the last few times, the Impact Hub in Oakland. All right. We'll start off with just a little bit of chit-chat between us. And I'll probably mute myself because there's a fair bit of background noise here. But the first thing to touch on is this last week, we were planning to launch our ICO sale, and we did not. That's the big news, is that we had to push that back. And the basic story is we thought that we were going to be able to handle both regulatory approvals and incorporation and banking in parallel. Turns out that we're having to do those in sequence. And so as a result, we had to push our launch back just a little bit, hopefully, fingers crossed. And as soon as we have a date confirmed that, yes, we've got all the things in place to do this in a legal way, in a regulatory compliant way, that's not going to cause us and our community headaches down the line, great, we should be able to launch. We're hoping that that happens within the next week. We believe that's going to be the case. David, can you touch on that stuff a little bit more? David and Gene, I'll let you both kind of chat about that, and I'll mute myself.
Sure, Matthew. So hello everyone. Haven't met you all, but lovely to meet you, and look forward to your questions. Yeah, there's two components to it. One is the choice of jurisdiction, which I don't think we've spent too much time talking about. It was something that we spent quite a lot of time on, and towards end of November, early December, we decided to shift jurisdiction and focus on building our organization in Liechtenstein. We have some great community relationships there, and there's a fantastic opportunity with the banking relationship as well to not only have a relationship with a bank that means we can move from the crypto and fiat worlds and in between the two, but also to be working more deeply with the bank in how the Holo system and Holo ecosystem will work with some of the banking APIs that had been developed. So we took that shift into Liechtenstein really seriously, knowing that there was a great deal of work that needed to go into incorporate the company, set up a bank account, things that we take for granted outside the crypto world, but in the crypto world take a little bit of time and a lot of effort. as Matthew said, we had to throw into the mix the regulatory approval there, and every jurisdiction is different. And in this case, we're looking at the ever growing uncertainty and changes around European regulations, local regulations, shifts from formal to informal processes, changes in documentation, etc. And in Liechtenstein, they like to have full regulatory approval before an ICO is launched. So I mean, there's a lot of details. If you guys would like to ask questions, feel free to ask questions. But as Matthew said, the simple summary is we made a shift to jurisdiction, which we think is going to be the best operating environment for Holo and Holochain, not pre-ICO, but as we run the project and build our organization through 2018 and beyond. We've tried to do it as quickly as possible, but tried to take the time so we do it all right and set up in the best possible way. So post-ICO, we focus on running a great organization and delivering on our promises, not scrambling to get our legals and financials and everything in place, which is really important to us. And we've hit a snag because as Matthew really succinctly put, we thought that the combination of regulator approval, incorporation, banking, and the associated activities could be done in parallel, whereas actually it's turned out to be sequential. And there's no formal process for regulator approval really in this world in any jurisdiction as far as we know. So we're working as best as possible with the changing circumstances with the Liechtenstein regulator to get everything set up so we're ready to run.
I want to add to that, David, and say the thing that I noticed when reviewing some of the notes that you've made along the way of doing this is that a lot of ICOs run without having done this kind of legwork because they're operating purely in crypto. And because Holo is this organization that's bridging between the regular world and the crypto world, like doing the work of finding a bank that would do both, is a piece of the issue for us. Like we need to operate and interact with the world as it is, as well as being, at the forefront of creating the world that's going to be, and getting the places right that would allow for that kind of straddling of worlds has been rather complicated.
Yeah, and I'll just say one last thing, not so much on those details, but just about the humans. We have an incredible team. We've got probably 30 people on this team at the moment, working pretty darn tirelessly to make this stuff happen. And a few of us end up being visible to our community. I'm one of those people who's fairly regularly visible. Gene has been somewhat visible. Arthur and Eric, founders, have been fairly visible, but David has not. And David basically throws himself tirelessly into things that would make me want to scratch my eyeballs out, like trying to help regulators invent new regulatory systems that will work for their jurisdictions, for the communities that are making use of these currencies, et cetera. And so I'm so grateful, David, for all the work. It's been kind of nonstop work for months and months and months. And not just, oh, cool, we're going to go do that one thing. No, you've done this like spider search of every possible way that we could do this stuff to try to bridge between these worlds of the distributed applications of the future and the centralized organizations of the present. So, all right. One of our questions right off the bat is, why Liechtenstein? Why not the US? Why not somewhere else?
Yeah, sure. There's a series of reasons. One, you're looking for an environment where banks are prepared to work with crypto projects, because you can't just pay all of your suppliers, people, other organizations in crypto only, or you can, but it's quite difficult. Then you spend an inordinate amount of time trying to manage that kind of world instead of bridging the two worlds. So one is you need a bank that's prepared to bridge two worlds. Two is a really strong regulatory environment where crypto is regulated but also supported. And so the projects are sort of nurtured by the local economy and spring up around those projects of service providers, developers, and organizations looking to create by changing the financial system, social system, etc. We looked at pretty much every jurisdiction across the world. There are about 10 that are really appealing for crypto projects. Although, being said, there are now in local jurisdictions, like there's some great projects coming out of Germany, the UK, the more traditional domains. When we started this journey and still looking at it now, there are, like Switzerland is very well known, Gibraltar reasonably well known, Isle of Man, Singapore, Hong Kong jump out as the most crypto-friendly environments. They were on our short list, but Liechtenstein jumped out, one, because of the exceptional banking, two, because of the exceptional community that's springing up there, and three, there is regulation and a friendly regulatory environment who's looking to grow their exposure in the crypto world. They're the primary reasons. And then probably just the supplementary reason is part of the EU, a passport into working across Europe and then across the world, and some really, really excellent both service providers and community jumping out there.
Yeah, we've gotten some incredible support from the folks in Liechtenstein at various levels of government banking and literally community organizers. And the point that you made at the end around Europe, from my perspective, I feel like Europe is a really aligned place. Much of what they're doing in terms of the GDPR, the general data privacy regulations, other things that are really focusing on, hey, we want humans, individuals to be in charge of their data, in charge of their applications. Those align with kind of the values of our project. And so we feel for a variety of reasons, that proximity of a ton of companies, capital, et cetera, Europe is a really rich place for us to seed this. It's not going to be the only place that it takes off. We want it to take off across the world, but it's a vibrant place for us to seed this. And that's one of the reasons why I'm here now. We have another question. Jean, do you want to take that one?
I didn't want to take the question. I wanted to add something about, we often have found in this project that looking forward, you don't know all the details, but when you look back, you're like, oh, that thing that seemed like a sideways step was actually the most sublime option we could have managed. And so that was one of the feelings that I got around the shift from Gibraltar to Liechtenstein, was that like we got the legal support from our team in Gibraltar and then moved over to the appropriate banking environment. And so it's like we've gotten this best of both worlds that we would not have gotten had we started and stayed in one or the other of them. And so that felt like somehow in the mix of all this, we've ended up raising the bar unbeknownst to us in the process, right?
Though I'm sure it wasn't fun to run a marathon and then realize that you got to run another marathon, David. All right. Let's see. Someone asked, James asked, are there any working dApps such that the holochain can be tested in or run as a working application? Yes, we do have some working applications. We've got a Clutter, which is a very simple version of peer-to-peer Twitter. That's actually getting upgraded almost daily at this point. There's a little community working on that. If you go into our chat.holochain.org community, you will be able to jump onto a channel that's app Clutter, and there's a bunch of conversation there. People are adding features, they're playing with things. Those are not necessarily getting pushed to the main branch, the version that people are looking at, but we're kind of upgrading. Not we, our community is building on that app as we speak. This week we've got an application that was developed at our Barcelona hackathon, a Fractal Wiki app. They're holding a whole hackathon in London that is independently organized. We're just basically showing up a little bit to support this other community that's excited about a wiki where you can look up a topic through a lens, through a particular lens. So it's not just what is gay marriage, it's what is gay marriage from the perspective of a civil rights attorney, or what is gay marriage from the perspective of an evangelical Christian. And those are very different things, right? And so there are some apps, and if you want to find more of them, jump into, again, our online community. There are people building and scheming on apps there as we speak. Jean, can you take the next question?
I can. I'm looking at several of them. What are the best ways for those in the USA to participate in the Holo community? And this is from Amanda Kay in the YouTube channel. And the best way to participate is probably to go to the Indiegogo campaign and get a device so that you can be earning Holo fuel down the road. In addition, you can jump on our online community or participate in our local meetups and get engaged in creating applications. And you don't have to be a developer to do that. You can go talk to somebody who is one and talk about what kind of things that you want to see emerging in this space. So those would be my key ways, either chat holochain.org or participating in our Indiegogo campaign.
Great. So I've got some other noise in the area around me. So if one of you can steer for just a little bit, that would probably be best.
Sure thing, Gene. We can just tag team, I guess.
Sure.
Would you like to take the, so we've got Wild Boys here. How can I change Holo fuel back to the Holo token?
Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. Nobody's ever asked that question. Why would you do that?
So I think it is, so to Wild Boys, firstly, neither are available at the moment, but yes, I think as Gene says, once the ecosystem's up and running, that question will have a little bit more relevance. You can purchase the Holo token through the ICO when the ICO launches, and then Holo fuel will be available a few months later when Holo launches. But we don't expect people to be converting Holo fuel back into the Holo tokens once the Holo environment is launched.
And in fact, when they turn in a Holo token for Holo fuel, it's a redemption. That token gets canceled and it's no longer a thing. So they will be disappearing. They will be becoming no longer a thing that can be redeemed.
That's right. I'll take this next question on, is there a media kit or an elevator pitch document to use when you try to explain what Holo project is trying to do? And the answer to that would be, I know our PR team is working on developing a media kit that'll go up on our website, holo.host. We hope that the website is a pretty good place for you to get that information. There's a nice simple table in the ICO page that explains the stuff that's going on for that. And I think that our video on Indiegogo is really great introduction to send people to.
So Gene, why don't we make a bit more marketing, as our project is not very well known? From Kenneth.
You know, the rest of you may have a different answer to this than I do, but my sense is there's a whole bunch of like glossy stuff going out there that doesn't have a lot of depth. We've chosen to put our resources into the depth of the work, the like getting it right, and not into making it pretty and glossy. And so we hope that the strength of the work itself is shining through and people are coming on board because of that, not because we paid $1 million to some team to make something pretty.
Yeah, and I will say I wish that we had better marketing. And as the quote-unquote director of communications, which is kind of inaccurate, but probably the more accurate title for me is I speak good. It would be wonderful, and we are working hard to try to get our story is complicated, right? What we're building in the world is new, and it's hard to communicate truly new things, especially when you're building a new thing on top of another new thing. Right? So that's what's made our story difficult is, oh, we're building Holo Host. What does that do? Oh, it helps bridge between Holochain and the World Wide Web. Well, what's Holochain? Right? That's a hard story. So,
and probably adding on top of that, it's just there are so many audiences as well, Kenneth. So we're communicating to many audiences at the same time. And I think that when we jump 6-12 months down the track and we're telling the story of Holo, a pure distributed application hosting environment, and the story of the Holo ports, that might be a really simple story and we can tell it really clearly. But here we're telling the story of an evolution of thinking. We're telling the story of the design of our currency. We're telling the story of Holochain. We're telling the story of why we've moved the bridge from the old world to the new world, or and the bridge backward through Holo. So we're telling a lot at once, and different parts of the story will resonate with different audiences. So definitely come into the Holo, the chat, and ask questions and find which part of the story really resonates with you, and then learn more about that part of the story would be my advice. I think we've all relate to this work and this thinking and this project a little bit differently, because there's so much to it, and we're all working to grow the parts of it which we love and support the parts of it which some of us even don't understand, or I don't at least.
Yeah, I will say, so I'm at the World Economic Forum this week, which is actually I'm in Davos during the World Economic Forum. I'm not attending the actual forum because I was asked to speak at a satellite event, and everybody here is focused on blockchain. Somebody at the forum, or I think somebody in the Wall Street Journal, wrote a piece saying that yes, at the forums in their materials, the word blockchain was mentioned more often than the words United States or Europe. Which is totally crazy. They said it was actually the most common word except for Trump, maybe, possibly. That might have been a joke. So I got introduced today to some folks with this introduction. Of all the cutting edge distributed computing, blockchains type projects, Holochain may be the most exciting, and you've never heard of them. And it's like, yeah, that's kind of true. Like, we think we're doing some pretty awesome stuff. We've been focused on building it, not on making it pretty. We are trying to make it easier to understand. We're working really hard on that, but it is hard work. All right. Yes, Jean.
I'm going to take this question from Melanie. She bought a Holoport and is excited about it and wants to know, like, the KYC on the ICO, and started through phone and then switched to the PC. And that's been an issue. And so we've noticed, like, you are not the only one. Like, we have noticed that this is an issue, that there are lots of people with computers that do not have a camera, or people with phones, and we don't have an app. And so just today, our coders were talking with a provider that's going to hook that up. And so fingers crossed, in the next 3 days, we'll be able to fix that problem by having a phone app. I know, Matthew, you might just be finding this out because it was just in the discussions today. So we're working quickly on that, and it's kind of the blessing of the regulator issue is that we have more time to help our community through this process, because again, we're doing something not a lot of people are doing, and we're trying to get it right. And so working with a provider to make those solutions as easy as we can and continue to streamline the process. So it's coming, and please bear with us. And thank you for asking the question for the others who are also having that experience.
Yeah. And maybe I build off that, Gene, into the what's KYC question, and then probably bridge back into an insight. One of the biggest insights is it's so much in this world is just being created as every day there's something new being created because people are building a new world. And so it happens that the KYC is know your customer, and we're really familiar with KYC, or know your customer processes, through when we want to open a bank account, for an example. But we're less familiar with these processes through fundraising, through cryptocurrency projects or ICOs, which traditionally have been moving money from one crypto wallet to another with really anonymously. But for banks who want to support crypto projects but also need to merge their crypto money with fiat currency, what they're looking for is a similar level of an understanding of where money has come from as they would have if someone was either opening a bank account themselves or moving money into bank accounts. So as our conversations with banks around the world have been around that, in order to bridge these two worlds and to have banking that allows us to move fiat currency around, we need to have know your customer or KYC processes running our ICO. So that's what KYC is, and why we use it is because we want to make sure people are who they say they are. We want to make sure that we have all of the right reference checks, and just like if anyone wants to participate in any crypto exchange, exactly the same process, so that the money can be moved into the bank account, and we can participate in the world in that way. And so just as Jean mentioned, what we've started to find is as we put something out into the world, like our KYC process, we find that the large percentage of our potential participants don't have webcams or are using different devices. And then as you build good relationships with the KYC provider, we find that there's another potential mobile solution. So much of what we're doing and the beauty of what we're doing is by pushing the boundaries, we find that there's someone else who's pushed the boundaries somewhere else. We're able to bring their solution in and solve problems or support you guys participating in the way we want you to be able to, which is cool.
Thanks, David. All right, we have another question. How much internet bandwidth does the Holo port need to work properly? Not much, but I don't know if I know that off the top of my head. I think that's going to be something that just requires a bit of testing. I think if you are on a really slow connection, if you are out in the middle of nowhere and it takes 2 minutes for your email to download, you will be able to participate in Holo, but it'll probably be for backing up data and doing some validation of data for the most part, not the raw serving of web pages, because your response time is not likely to be high enough to give you a reputation that's going to lead developers and communities to actually choose you as the host that they're wanting to represent them to the person who's accessing them through a website. So yeah, faster, better connections help, but we have architected this in a way where we're trying to make it so even those who are on low capacity devices, slow devices, devices that are hooked up to the internet but not with a gigabyte connection speed, are not that most people are going to have a gigabyte connection speed, but that they're able to participate and benefit as well. Yes, Jean.
Yeah, so I mean, this doesn't precisely answer the question, but related to that, we finished doing our benchmarking, and so that information has been shared internally, and I don't have it at the top of my head. But Emmeline, who did a blog post a couple of weeks ago on how we did our benchmarking and pricing, is going to be updating that post with a bunch more information. And so if you want the kind of specs that'll give you some details on that, it's in the pipeline and should be coming out in the next few days.
Cool. Should I jump on with the? James, I'll quickly explain the regulator issue as you put in italics. So there's not an issue as in a problem. It's in Liechtenstein. We explained briefly before, but in December we decided to run our organisation in Liechtenstein for a series of reasons I won't go into now. As part of that, we thought there are a series of things that we needed to do that were in parallel, but they're actually sequential. One of the things that needs to happen in Liechtenstein is the regulator needs to give approval across a series of dimensions. What's that, sorry?
Okay, yeah. I said approval of what?
Yeah, across a series of dimensions, which is primarily, is the token security, a utility token, etc. That's one. Do we have a proper know your customer or KYC processes in place? And are we, or is the project running foul of any kind of e-money laws or any other sort of data privacy or European laws that are either currently governing or are looking to govern that space. So we're just working with the regulator to make sure that what we already know is confirmed. In terms of pandering, building the new world and pandering to the old, look, I think if you reading our website, reading the green paper, watching the videos, which we know that you can't just build it. We believe that you have to be able to bridge between worlds, and that's the best possible way to build the new world. And that's what we're doing through Holo. The entire project is about that, and that's why we've taken the approach that we have to jurisdiction, to working with the right banks, to the kind of companies that we're building, the structures that we're building in our organization, and to working with the regulator, because we're bridging between one world to another.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to on-ramp people into the new world if you don't give them a way to get there. Yep. If you don't give them a path to go from A to B. There's no way to get them from A to B.
Yeah, I want to add to that this is not year one. This project has been going on for a decade. Like the seeds of it started a decade ago. This is the moment in which we are asking for some kind of closer to traditional funding for it. So we have been building that other world for a while and operating to a large extent in that space. We've come back because we want to mainstream this. We want a lot of people involved, right? And they need a pathway to get there.
Yeah, we want the rest of the world to be able to start playing by new, healthier patterns. But you don't do that by throwing them off a cliff or inviting them to jump out of a plane without a parachute. No, you go, hey, here, take my hand. But that because we're trying to build that bridge, that means we have to really hold a lot of tensions because we're straddling both. Shi Guangli asked, other projects all focusing on decentralized. Why are you focusing on distributed? Should I take that, Jean?
Yes, go ahead.
I love that one.
So I thought you'd light up.
Decentralized applications mean there's still a hierarchy, right? There's, like the nation state system is decentralized. There's not one global government. The United States is a government, and Germany is a government, and China has a government, and individuals aren't able to sign treaties with other individuals in other countries. No. Only the authority in that one jurisdiction can. So that's a decentralized world. It's not a world with a single center. A distributed world is different. A distributed world is more like what a forest looks like. And in a distributed world, every part of that entire ecosystem has a degree of agency and is able to do its own sense making about what it wants to spend its effort on, what it's going to pursue, what it's going to move away from, etc. And we think that distributed pattern is actually far more vibrant, that it leads to much richer sense making. It enables far greater learning in your actual lived context. It enables far better thriving. Jean is most famous in my world for being the author of Thrivability and known as, well, Nurture Girl, but also Thrivable. And it's about going beyond sustaining and trying to actually find upward spirals, ways that things get better, not just hopefully don't get too much worse. That's far too low a bar for us to aim for. And so decentralized doesn't get us there, unfortunately. You need to actually go beyond that.
Yeah, I would add to that. I mean, that's beautiful. I love it when you talk about that, Matthew. And I would add this anti-fragile quality, right? Like a piece of our system is not just that we can scale, but that it has the self-healing properties that allow it to be anti-fragile. And so the distribution of that is critical to that ability to self-heal and for our system to be effective at scale.
And as Jean pointed out to me long ago, the difference between resilient and anti-fragile is that with an anti-fragile system, when something gets disrupted, it actually gets better. It starts to fit its environment better, but you have to have a particular set of organizing architectures to support that. And those are distributed architectures. All right, from our perspective, that's the data storage and social coordination pattern that all natural living systems make use of because it's what leads to persistence, essentially. Can you speak to the diversity of interested communities other than tech? Jean, do you want to take that one?
Sure. I'm quite excited because I feel like so many of these systems have been designed by a particular community, could be Silicon Valley, that has their interests at heart, right? They can't escape their own needs and wants and vision. And so I've been excited to be including and inviting people across a broad spectrum of lived experience so that we can have applications that work for more people in their lived experience. So for example, trying to connect with communities of color in Oakland or with female hackers when we were in Berlin, reaching across some of these zones to try and look at how are we going to, what are the core things that need to be developed? And for me in particular, I've been interested in things like when Foursquare came out and you could know my location, I was anxious about that. Like, that might be great for some, you know, strong white dude, but for me, who do I want to know where I am? And how do I manage that information? And so the way the architecture works in Holochain, I feel excited that we can be building applications that are custom for the communities that they serve. And if those are successful, those communities like them, then those will become more popular and more used. And if they're not, then they will just serve the communities of interest that are appropriate to them. So I think that the way that we're setting up our architecture and the people that we are inviting to the table will help make this a more broadly available and applicable system.
And I'll add to that, that when a community starts making use of something, they actually are in power. They're able to then change it and adapt it to meet their needs better over time. They're able to learn from, oh, that didn't work so well. Let's change that. Oh, that worked great. Cool, let's use more of that. One of the other pieces that I'd like to kind of highlight here is, yes, we're trying to get all sorts of different communities using tech for their needs, but one of the things that's been really interesting is all of the variety of communities that are non-technical, that don't think of themselves as coders, that are coming to us because they recognize that they need some infrastructure to support healthier patterns, more thriving patterns, whether that is food cooperatives, or I was dealing with people today who are looking to do peer-to-peer energy grids in India and Africa. Other people focused on education and wanting there to be much more relevant educational opportunities. And so there's just such a diverse array of people who are going, I need tools to help me accomplish this. We're struggling to get people coordinating in ways that really are a level up above how things are at, where things are at today. That's been exciting. It's the earliest adopters are going to be developers, because the tool is a developer tool. But often those developers are going to be employed by people who are going, we want this change in the world to be real.
Matthew, I'll just add one thing. I think like what we're seeing through the hackathons is that also distributors to systems, really, that kind of thinking really attracts social changes. And so we're seeing, as I'd say, we're seeing an equal balance of tech and social change from our hackathons and in the early stage of interest in developing apps. So I imagine when we check back in a year's time, and we look at some of the early apps that will be developed, a lot of them are going to come from that social change space, just because they're attracted to the distributed, not decentralized nature of what we're building, which you two were so eloquently describing a minute ago.
Yeah, and this is not surprising because the social change sector was also the first on the social media bandwagon and leading the edge on how to practice social media. So yeah, I'm not surprised that this is inviting people. Can we grab this question about, please explain how you would achieve value stable for the coin? I think this is fun, and I can start, and Matthew or maybe David can finish up for me. So one of the core things that's been part of this community for ages is a concern about fiat currency and the making money out of nothing. And we believe that even most crypto is basically made out of, it's not quite nothing, but close to it. It's not based on an asset. It's not asset backed. And so our currency being asset backed is like, as long as web hosting, as long as hosting is the valuable thing, then the currency that is relating to that hosting will be a valuable thing. And it's not just purely based on speculation and people driving up the value based on what they can imagine it being about. So that's a real thing in the world. And then the other piece has to do with it being a mutual credit currency. So for every transaction, if somebody's going up, somebody else is going down, the whole system is maintaining a zero balance all of the time. So you're not going to get a wild up without also having a corresponding wild down. And so those two things, the being asset backed and the mutual credit double entry accounting piece that we have, I think is a big part of why we think it'll be value stable. Now, this is something that I've wrestled a little bit with Matthew about, because he's like, stable. It's like, well, it breathes, right? There is some fluctuation there. It's not static, but it should be fairly reliable and consistent, especially in comparison to the other cryptocurrencies that are on the market. Matthew, you want to jump?
Yeah, the one other piece that I'll add that is a mechanism that is unusual that we've designed is the ability to issue new currency and even have others issue new currency as well as redeem currency. So currency enters into and is capable of leaving our system. And so when currency is high, hey, we might have more issuances, and that additional supply may end up bringing that back down. When currency is low, we might have more, we might have more redemptions when it's high, more issuance when it's low. And so because we don't have a fixed supply, any currency that has a fixed supply, small changes in demand can lead to giant spikes in volatility. If you have a supply that can breathe, you can counterbalance those increases in demand or decreases in demand, and get to a fairly stable. You don't get static. It's not something that doesn't change, but it goes like this instead of going, up, down, up, down, up, down. And for us, since we're trying to have our currency be a medium of exchange, its design is intended to foster bridging, this hosting service between peer-to-peer apps and the centralized web. We want that activity. We're trying to foster a ton of that activity flow, and we're actually incentivized to do so. Our business model is, hey, we take a small transaction fee when people perform that work and get compensated for doing it. So we've designed this currency to be used. Stability helps in that regard. You have a stable currency, people are going, cool, I can just use this thing. If you have a currency that people think is going to go through the roof, and they're constantly thinking that, they're deathly afraid of spending it because they're going, oh man, if I spend it, what's going to happen? Do we hope that our currency goes up? Yeah, we think we've priced it pretty well and that it's going to gain in value. But is it something that's designed to be a skyrocket forever? No, nothing is. That's not a real system. That's a fantasy or a Ponzi scheme. So we're trying to design our system to not be speculative gambling tokens, but actual functioning currency that facilitates real valuable flows of activity. I see a question here. If we did not buy, or if we do not buy a Holo port, are we able to deploy our own node? And what is the minimum hardware requirement? Yes, you will be able to deploy your own node on Holo. You'll be able to use initially, we think initially we're going to ship Holo ports, and soon after that we're going to release source code that people can run on their own devices. That will be initially supportive of Linux as an operating system. What are the minimum requirements? I don't know that off the top of my head. I think it's pretty minimal, considering that with the HoloPort Nano, we're selling a plug computer, basically something not quite the same as, but akin to a Raspberry Pi type architecture with no storage. So that's something you plug into an existing storage device. But you're going to need some amount of processing, you're going to need some amount of storage, and you're going to need to be hooked up to the internet. And initially, you're going to need to run Linux. Over time, we're planning or intending to support Mac, Windows, etc. How much store? Yeah, go ahead.
I would add to that, like, the whole deal with us selling the devices is part of that commitment to the mainstream. It's like, okay, if you're geek enough to understand what to do on Linux, you're good. You could probably just install the software on your own. But if you want to join this new world, we're selling this plug and play device that'll allow you to participate without having to learn how to code yourself.
Or at least how to configure an application. I hope there's not much coding involved for the folks that are, well, they might be needing to do some command line terminal stuff, maybe. Not sure. We'll see how easy we're able to make the roll your own versions of Holo. I'm sure the earliest versions are going to be pretty bare bones, and over time, hopefully we're able to make that user experience just easier and easier. Liquid Fluidity asked, how much storage can be added to HoloPort now? I don't really know. I'm guessing it's an awful lot. I don't think there's an upper limit on that, unless your device has a hard time talking to more storage, but I can't imagine that would be the case. I may not have the depth of hardware knowledge to definitively answer that, but my expectation is no. To the question from Wild Boys, I think his question was, when I earn Holo Fuel, how can we spend that? All right, this was in reference to the, can I transfer it out to tokens? Can it only be used in the Holo ecosystem, or can it be exchanged in fiat? Do you want to talk to that,
David?
Yeah, sure. So another great question. At this stage, the ecosystem that we're building we know that people need to be able to both move into the ecosystem and move out of the ecosystem. So yes, you'll be able to redeem your Holo Fuel moving out. Over the first year or so, it will only be redemption in cryptocurrencies, and that we'll be working over time to see what we can do in terms of redemption in fiat. But that's a pretty long and complicated journey. So that's the answer around redemption. The other part of the question was, what can we use the Holo Fuel for within the ecosystem? So what you'll be able to do when you redeem is redeem the Holo Fuel that was used for hosting. But we do imagine that there'll be non-hosting activity with Holo Fuel that happens with the ecosystem because, as Gene and Matthew mentioned, because of the characteristics of our currency that we're building. Now, we won't know until the ecosystem live what kind of activity that will be. There'll certainly be governance rules to make sure certain activity is not allowed, but we want people to be able to participate freely in the ecosystem. So I think time will tell.
Yeah, and the one portion of our currency design that I'll make visible there for why we think people might use this instead of other things for exchanging value is we have a really low exchange rate. We're able to support very tiny exchanges of value at an economical rate. A pretty basic principle is if your accounting costs more than the value of the transaction, you're better off not doing the accounting, right? Which means you're not able to actually foster a flow of activity that's incentivized by some compensation structure. And it's just going to be gift at that point. We've created an architecture that enables that kind of accounting to be profitable, basically, the accounting to be cheaper than your transaction value, even when it's a really low value transaction. In the Bitcoin world today, I wouldn't ever send Gene $10 worth of Bitcoin because it would cost $40 to send it. So that would be like lighting $40 on fire in order to, in the hopes that someone would hand her a $10 bill. That's just silly. So that's one of the main reasons we think people are going to try to use this architecture. What that means is it'll probably be used for particular types of transactions rather than others. Micro transactions are something we're going to be really great at. If we are 1% as a transaction fee, there may be gigantic transactions that are not choosing to use Holo for their transfers. Right? That 1% could be a pretty big chunk if you're doing $1 million transaction. But we're actually intending to try to limit the size of the transactions that we're having processed initially until we make sure that the patterns are solid, because we don't want people transferring $1 million and then they're something going wrong before we've really road tested everything. So we're really aiming at microtransactions early on. Chad asked, any upcoming applications like Facebook so I can abandon it to the suite? Yeah, that's pretty awesome. Yes, we're certain that people are going to build things like Facebook. That said, Facebook is a giant application, not just giant in terms of its user base, giant in terms of its complexity. They have a bunch of different things that they do. They do chat, they do video, they do a live streaming thing. Right? There's a whole bunch of different aspects there. The earliest, simplest version of a social network we've already created with Clutter. That's our peer-to-peer Twitter. It's just a proof of concept application at this moment. We're trying to improve it and make it much more functional and usable so that it actually can start going out and people use it instead of Twitter. And I see a fairly natural migration with people building on that type of architecture and adding additional features. Any other comments from you guys? Yeah, Jane.
Yeah, I want to add to that one of the things that I love about the structure for building applications on Holochain is this ability to have these meta applications about identity and social network that are at the root, and then you can have all these other applications that are on top. And so my version of Facebook is not your version of Facebook, and those could be interoperable, right? Like, I miss some of the web when we didn't have all these pictures distracting me from the content that I'm trying to read, because I like the wordy stuff. And so my version of Facebook might not be that, but picture-based, where other people are like, really, I want an Instagram. And so being able to interact with my friends who are very picture-based while I'm more text-based is going to be possible in Holochain in a way that really excites me.
That's awesome. Gustavo says, how can I join into the conversation about how to tell the story? Awesome, Gustavo. There's a handful of us on the team working on that at the moment. Ping me in our chat community. Again, that's chat.holochain.org. My username is @MatthewJoseph, MatthewJosef. And I will gladly connect you with some other folks. That said, you don't have to do it with us. You can also start trying to tell our story other ways. We had somebody who I think has since started to get much more involved with our project, but at the time when this piece came out, I had never heard of him, a guy named Jamie Klinger. He wrote a really great piece explaining Holochain to the world. I think it was called "The Blockchain Gains a Dimension" or "Adds a Dimension," and it was brilliant. It was so clear and wonderful and told differently than we would tell it. And so my ideal world is not that we, the organization, becomes super masterful. It's that lots of other people go, this is what I see here that I'm excited about. And they start telling their stories.
Yeah, I want to jump on that and say, so every week I've been doing something called Holo Chats. And so I do an initial post that says, hey, let's talk about responsibility and what does that mean? And usually it's got like a business question, a philosophical question, and then a technical question or set of questions. And so jumping on any of those and spinning off and creating your own content and then saying tag Holo Chats and the theme of the week. And you can go back to other previous themes as well. And then at the end of the week, we go scoop content from across the web and go, hey, there's this interesting piece that so-and-so said that uses these two tags. Let's pull that into the collective intelligence that we're weaving together. And so you can look back at Semathesy or ethical computing and see what the community is sharing on that. So that would be a nice, like, dip your toe in way to start engaging in the conversation with us.
And some of the types of media that we would love to see are articles people have written, interviews people do with one another where they're having a conversation, they've just recorded it. It could be a short one, it could be a long one, and just anything that's on that topic. And just tag us and we will then make it visible. We've got a wonderful member of our team, a guy named Robert Best, who is just an incredible cartographer, a mapper, and somebody who just is really savvy at pulling things off of the web. So we will try to make visible your voice, your contributions in that space as well. We've got a
maybe
question.
the final, or just one couple of sentences, Matthew. The final thing is when we're not, as we're looking at our evolving organization design, we're looking to bring the community closer to the organization and make the organization smaller. So when we're thinking about the evolution of Holochain, we're not talking about 100,000, 10,000, 5,000 people in a central organization. That would be slightly antithetical to what we've been describing over this hour. We're talking about large community membrane with small central hubs or pods. So please, don't feel excluded by participating this way. This is the way we're looking for all participation.
Thank you for making that visible, David. We have another question that we kind of answered this at the beginning, but I'm sure that we didn't have as many people on at that point. When is the ICO? So we pushed back our ICO this week. We were hoping to do it this week. We pushed it back. Excuse me. We're hoping that it will be within the next week. but we can't give a confirmation on that until we get our approvals from our regulators, bankers, incorporation stuff, etc. So we're going to find out shortly. If you want more details on that, we went into great detail on that earlier in the call. You can watch the recording. Mark asked, what is the current hashtag for distributed chat? Jean, can you answer that for the Holo chats for this week?
Yeah. If you mean the Holo chats, the current tag this week is responsibility. And next week coming up is applications. Super excited to be talking about applications.
And I just want to say I'm ashamed that I owe Jean an article on responsibility that I wrote, but I just haven't had time to like polish. She's like, it's basically done, send it. And I'm running around and a bit of a perfectionist, so sorry, Jean.
It's okay. I'm doing a conversation with Kevin Jones, and that's gotten pushed until Monday, the 29th. So that too will be on responsibility. So it doesn't have to stick firmly to the week.
Yeah. And for those of you who don't know, Kevin Jones is a long time kind of ally, friend, sparring partner, etc. of a number of us on the team who is, he started something called SOCAP, the Social Capital Conference. It has played a big role in the role of impact investing and really kickstarting that whole movement around responsible business, basically, and responsible investing.
Thus, we're going to talk to him about responsibility.
Exactly. This is a good one, and I actually don't know this off the top of my head because I'm not, I don't think this has been affected, but I could be wrong. James asked, are your dates for shipping still confidently May-ish? I don't know that answer off the top of my head. We have pushed back our ICO a couple of times. I don't know what that's going to do to our speed on the delivery of Holo. We've been aiming for a spring shipping and launch of our network. We're hoping to still do that, though it may be that we're pushing into June or something like that. I don't know what the actual date is going to be. Do you know, Jean? Do you have any more?
No, I don't know the date. And there's this crazy thing that happens where it's like, well, that slipped a little bit, but then we got more people on board who were more excited, and then they push it forward faster. And so there's like, the relationship with the supplier for the hardware is in place, and it's just a matter of how many people are showing up to help code that and how fast they're able to get it working. So,
and some of the stuff that's been useful here, some of the stuff that's been useful, I'm on a community building tour in the EU, basically in the European Union, and my whole goal is to get people building on Holochain and also interested in playing with Holo. And what I'm starting to see is with some of the larger organizations, especially the people who are doing real change the world projects and ones that are interested in things like peer-to-peer electricity, et cetera, they may be so impatient to have Holo for their own use that they may actually start throwing developer talent towards building it themselves. So we might end up having the ability to get a larger team than we were expecting, building portions of this. So I don't exactly know where that, how quickly, for us, the hardware is not going to be the slow thing. The hardware is going to ship on schedule, sweet. The question is the software going to be done and ready, solid to go for our earliest test cases, right? Just getting our first testnet stuff. Are we going to be able to get that ready and out the door by May? I'm not certain at this point. That's not a no. We just don't have that clarity. We basically are at the top of the hour. Are there any specific questions that you two see here that you're like, ooh, I want to answer this?
I think most of these questions are good questions for chat@holochain.org as opposed to our ICO focused people. I think we've answered the ICO questions that we've seen, plus some. And Matthew, thank you. I know that you were going to run off and get to your networking there, and you stayed and helped answer questions, and some of them were quite appropriate for you. So I'm very glad. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to make visible, because we tend to try to make things visible in our team, I am in a hallway at a hotel, basically stuck behind a cigarette machine in a tiny alcove. because it was the only place that I could find that was quiet enough to do a call and had Wi-Fi. So occasionally we had people coming up and buying cigarettes, which I was like, oh, people buy cigarettes still, out of vending machines. You don't see that a whole lot in San Francisco. All right. Reminders. Our ICO, we're hoping that launches within the next week or so. If you're interested in learning more, go to chat.holochain.org. You can learn more about us at holo.host, as well as holochain.org. We've got meetups. Look on meetups, search Holochain or Holo there. And if you have questions, share them in the chat. The last one is Holo Chats. Go check out Gene's beautiful blog posts in our Medium. Gene, is it medium.com/H_O_L_O? Holo with underscores in between. You're muted, Gene.
Sorry, it's our Twitter handle on Medium.
It's our Twitter handle on Medium, yeah. So go check out the Medium posts on the Holo Chats and then host your own. Go write an article, have a conversation, record it, post it somewhere. You can do it on Instagram. If you can get really artsy, if somebody wants to come up with an interpretive dance for responsibility and post that, we would gladly link to that.
Have fun with it.
Yeah, let's have the creatives come in and start being part of this conversation as well. Till next time, thank you all. Gene, David, thank you so much.
Thank you. Ciao.